Hey everybody, I'm Tom Barnas. This is the 78 podcast. Thanks for watching. It is a joint venture with Stories from the 78 website, and I appreciate that you go over there, storiesfrom78.com. Check out all the fun stories that I do, post about one a week here on the platform. So I appreciate if you could subscribe, the whole thing, subscribe on YouTube and Spotify playlist or what have you. I appreciate it either way for hearing me rant. Very fun week on the 78. I did a story about Superdawg. Been around for now 76 years. Superdawg at the corner of Milwaukee and Devon, and it's been a family-owned business the entire time. Started by a husband and wife that both used to only have it open during the summertime, right? The husband came back from overseas fighting in World War II, and they would do it. One was a teacher and one was like an accountant, I believe, for like CPS. And they would open it in the summertime when they had time to, hang out when school was out. They would go there. And it was just a walk-up stand all those years ago. And it morphed into like, hey, this is a business that seems to be doing well. We like the people. We like hanging out with people. So they made it like a full-time thing. And here we are 76 years later. Superdawg is one of the coolest places in Chicago, and everything in Superdawg was custom made for the space that is inside Superdawg, including like the floors. They have like 2x4s or like these little pieces of wood slats. So the floor is not solid. It's got these little slats that absorb like the shock of walking on it. And it's also easier to clean and stuff doesn't get in the way. And then I think they take the floors up and they scoop all the stuff at the end of the night and then, they clean it up. But that, along with the steamer where the hot dogs are and the buns and everything else, it's all made because the space is so small and it's the original kitchen. So it's really fascinating to see how it evolved over time. And the gentleman that owned Superdawg back in the day, he came up with all these patented designs to make it fit the space, which made it super efficient, including the potato cutter. Now, people have been to restaurants where you got the potato cutter, you put it on the wall and you just pull down, potatoes come out, right? Well, their potato cutter is very different in the way it cuts it differently. It gives you the crinkle fries, and he patented that, and it's been theirs for years and years and years. So the entire experience at Superdawg is very unique. It's like stepping back into Chicago time, just because the walk-ups are the kind where they have the people that come out on roller skates, and some not on roller skates, but they have people on roller skates. They'll bring you your food. You come up to the wall there on the side, and you can type in the order, or you type in that you want the order. You say the order, and then inside, underneath the part that is where they sit down and take the orders from people, it's modeled after the control tower at O'Hare Field. That's what people call it back in the day, O'Hare Field, O'Hare Airport now. But back in 70 plus years ago, it was a military field. That was O'Hare. And it's just a cool experience. And it's still owned by the family. Brother, sister, and brother-in-law run Superdawg now. And it is in a fantastic place. The packaging is still the same as it was, 70 plus years ago. They took pride in that fact that they were unique and different. They have little vents so your hot dogs don't get all soggy when they put them in their little boxes. It's just a cool thing. And I loved it. I love telling that story. It's over at storiesfromthe78.com. If you want to click on the website, just type in Norwood Park or type in Superdawg, and you'll see the interview, a nice long interview, about 20 minutes with the three owners. We had a great time, and the food, outstanding. Speaking of food and Chicago food, like hot dogs, kind of put Chicago on the culinary map years and years ago. Well, so did the Italian beef sandwich, Sorry, I just go back. My parents had a place called Hey Buds back in the day, and I worked there when I was in high school. And people would come in, and it was right at 56 and Pulaski, so South Side, right? And people would come in, and they'd ask, can I have that Italian beef sandwich? Give me a combo, put the red sauce on it and the peppers. And they weren't talking about giardiniera. They were talking about green peppers all over, and then dip it, make it wet. So as a 15-year-old, you're like, make it wet? What? But nonetheless, Italian beef sandwiches have been around in Chicago for the better part since like World War I, actually. According to the gentleman that owns Al's Beef now, he ran it from his his uncle. But, Al's Beef started off back in the day in Little Italy, and Anthony Ferrero was the person that would peddle the food to the people in the neighborhood, right? They would peddle the streetcar, the food, because it was cheap to make. You'd slice the beef really, really thin, and then you would almost overcook it. So when you dumped it in the beef au jus, as they say, it would soak up the water or soak up the gravy, right? And they put it on sandwich buns, because sandwich buns were super cheap back in the day. You just get some bread. And that is what became like the Italian beef sandwiches. But it gained popularity during the Great Depression. So I'm reading what I wrote because it's been a minute since I did this story. Chris Picelli is the owner now, and he tells the story wonderfully. But back in the day, his great grandfather or uncle would pedal around like almost like those ice cream carts with the that we see now all over the place. They pedal around and they would offer up these Italian sliced sandwiches. And then somehow the peanut weddings, as they were called back in the Depression, these Italian weddings in Little Italy, people wanted food to feed a lot of people, right? Weddings have a lot of people and needed cheap. So that's where the Italian beef gained its fame. And the guy did it on the side. And then his brother or his uncle or one of the people in the family was also involved in the mafia. And they needed a front. So he's like, well, I've been doing the street peddling thing. I can do this as the front to the, bookie joint. And so that's what happened. So there's a photo in the story itself of the original front in Little Italy. It's just a cool Chicago story, right? Well, more Chicago than that is that the front, the beef place, started making more money than the bookie joint. People started coming in. So the guy's like, I want to go legit and just open up a beef stand. And that is where Al's Beef was born. So that is in Little Italy, right on Taylor Street, right by University Medical Campus area, what have you, by the old Cook County Hospital that is now like a Hyatt. It's a cool place. It's like, it's as OG as you can get. They moved places, but the current building, I think, has been around since the 70s. Right there in Little Italy, a very cool story, and I highly recommend checking that out just because it's a fun thing. I got an opportunity to interview a person that wrote about the disappearance of Judy Garland's ruby slippers from Wizard of Oz. And you might think you might know the story. I promise you don't. The book is called Under the Rainbow, and it's about how there was I think 4 total pairs of these slippers that were made for the movie. The pair that was used in the movie is worth about $6 million. And it currently did sit at the Judy Garland Museum up in Minnesota, of all places. And I don't know. I think it's a fun story. I won't get into a lot of it. It involves Secret Service, random, right? The museum up in Grand Rapids, Minnesota. And this is from 1939, folks. So 1939, that's when the Wizard of Oz came out, designed by Gilbert Adrian, who did it for $4 back in the 30s to design these things that are now famous with, Clicking the Heels and, No Place Like Home. And the story, that's just the beginning of the story. I'm trying to read the actual name of the person that here I'll find it right here. Jeff Keane. Thank you. Jeff Keane is the one who wrote this book. It's about his father-in-law, who was a Secret Service guy. So lots happening there. Great story. I highly suggest checking that out. Read the book. You want to check out the podcast. It gets into the whole thing, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful story. Went up to Machine Engineer. Do you know where that is? It's up in Wicker Park in Chicago, or down in Wicker Park, depending where you are in the city. Awesome place. They have a florist on site in there. And I did a story about this place maybe a few months back, but they open up their like little tropical garden, and it's called At the Machine. So basically it's their outside version of it. Their drinks are second to none. Their food, their brunch is fantastic. So if you're looking to explore the city a little bit, you want to go to Wicker Park, I highly suggest checking that out. It was so great. It's a quick little story. I did a little YouTube short on that one, but you can read about it more. But the drinks are spectacular. You really want to impress a date, go there. The florist is there. You can have the florist come to the table. Like how like the guacamole cart comes to your table at certain restaurants? Well, they have the florist version of that. They come, They do the whole thing. It's fantastic. Love it. A post I saw on Instagram not too long ago was kind of concerning. And, it's a bigger story, obviously, about violence in big cities, right? The uptick in violence. And depending on your political views, there's reasons why that the violence is more, it seems like it's more than it ever was. And that, I don't know if that's because it's always been that way and now social media is more aware of it than it used to be or what have you. But there's a place called Heritage Bikes and Coffee up in Lakeview, right by Lakeview and kind of Lincoln Parkish, kind of where they kind of meet on Lincoln Avenue. And they've been there for over 10 years in the neighborhood. And in the last 5 years, they've been broken into 5 times. And I did a story with Michael is the name of the owner, did a story with him when they first opened. And it was a welcome sight to the neighborhood just because there wasn't a lot of bike shops. There were a lot of Cheney bike shops. But Heritage Bikes and Coffee, the original idea of it was a bike shop that also had a coffee house in it. And not only a bike shop where you get your bikes repaired and fixed, but it's a bike shop that is they build bikes right here in Chicago. You know what I mean? So these are well-crafted bikes, and it's an homage to Schwinn when Schwinn used to make bikes all the way up until the 70s, I think, or it was the first bike shop to open since the 70s. It's been Schwinn until they made bikes and then went out of business. So this guy's like a Chicago guy, grew up in the city. He said he's not a bike rider, like a cyclist, but he's a city cyclist, meaning, and that's what I am, a city cyclist. I love riding my bike around the city. I don't need to, go down the street going 100 miles an hour, pumping, and killing people on the lakefront path. I mean, I remember riding bikes on lakefront path before it was like a paved path. So there you go. And same thing with Michael, the owner of Heritage Bikes and Coffee. And they keep getting broken into. And in true Chicago fashion, he's like, I'm going to keep putting this back up. I'm not letting people scare me out of my own neighborhood. And, people are like, why don't you put up the chains in front of it? And he's like, I don't want to put up the chains. They look like shit. I remember that when I was in New York and how terrible that looked. And, we're trying to make the city look pretty, not go back to the gates across the thing. And if they really want to get in, they'll get past the gates and they'll do more damage trying to get the bikes by going through the gates. Right. So his biggest thing was what are we doing? The alderman in the city, the mayor, what are we doing? And yes, there are bigger fish to fry than a small bike shop. But if we keep ignoring the small bike shops all over the city, or the coffee shops, or, the boutiques that get broken into, they're going to stop opening here and they're going to leave and they're going to go to other parts of the world that they do enforce the law and that they do have their shit together. And I feel like right now is a tipping point in Chicago where you got people like Michael who are like, screw you guys. I'm going to keep doing this and we're going to keep pushing forward. And that's why I do this website and this podcast to bring light to these businesses, because there's so much good in the city. And there's just, and it's like the same crews that hit across the street at another place, an Italian or a Mexican place or Italian place. I can't remember, but up and down the street. And it just keeps happening all over the city. There's these crews that just go and hit up and down, and nothing happens to them. They don't get caught and nothing happens to them. So it's very frustrating for these business owners. And I don't know, I find it frustrating as a person who loves the city to see it happen. But even his posts on Instagram was come on, Chicago, what are we doing? So it's a call out to our elected officials to do something for the neighborhoods, especially neighborhoods perhaps you thought that didn't need any help, like Lincoln Park. There's plenty there. And one thing Michael told me that I find shocking in 2024 with the traffic problem Chicago has, which we're second behind New York City with the worst traffic in the country, is that there's not a bus that goes down Lincoln Avenue in this part of the city. It stops in this particular part by Southport, Wellington, and Lincoln, right? It stops. It turns around from both sides, from the south and north. It comes in that area, turns around, and then goes back. It's right by the St. Alphonsus Church right there. I find that insane. And he said that's a huge problem because there's no bus that goes by. So people don't walk that area anymore. They don't walk. There's a lot of the places have closed because the buses don't travel up and down that corridor. And I asked him why. And he said that the city did a study, CTA did a study in 2013 to shut down the bus system because they needed to save money, which is insane because it's Lincoln Avenue. And there's other parts of Lincoln Avenue that the buses go, right? Down in the city, further into Lincoln Park and whatnot, all the way to Old Town. And you're just what are you talking about? The bus just stops. And it does. It just stops for a few blocks radius there and nobody takes a bus, which is insane because there's no public transportation anywhere around there either. It's like a mile to the red line stop. So, he just wants his elected officials to do better. And I encourage him to run for alderman. Why not? Right? Michael's awesome. And it was a pleasure to tell the story. And if you've never been to Heritage Bikes, the coffee's great. They have breakfast. The getting your bike fixed is also it's just like, it feels like you're in a movie, because that's what this place is. It's a wonderful place. And I highly suggest going there and checking them out. I don't know. I love it. I've been posting a lot of stories about Pullman. I find that neighborhood fascinating. And I did a story about their garden walk that they had this past weekend. But it's a lot of that stuff you can go for free. So I would suggest just checking out the website, going down to Pullman, doing the walking tour. I mean, it's a fascinating neighborhood in the city that was like one of the first planned neighborhoods in the city. So check that out. But I will end the podcast today about the band Future Islands. So if you've never seen this band in concert, it's nothing short of incredible. It really is. It's like, like especially nowadays, there's a lot of poser bands out there. And a lot of the older rock bands are just older rock bands now, like the Foo Fighters and Pearl Jam are like the old man bands now, because those guys are in their 50s, right? And there's a lot of like up and coming music, and it's great, but a lot of bands just don't know how to be bands, right? Like on stage, they don't command a presence, or they're afraid to be something that they're not, because they don't want TikTok to take them out of context, or there's all that stuff going on, which I find kind of sad. But the Future Islands and Samuel T. Herring, who's the lead singer, if you haven't seen this guy perform, do yourself a favor. Even if you don't like their music, and you probably will like it at the end of watching one of their things, or watch my video on the website, it is nothing short of incredible. It was like a soul cleansing experience. It was wonderful. I loved it. And I highly recommend anybody that is looking for a new band, wants to feel inspired by the band, and probably hear the most authentic, original voice I've ever heard in music. Maybe outside of like, I'm trying to think of like an artist where their voice just floored you. Maybe like he doesn't sing like Whitney, right? Not like that, like the falsetto and all that stuff. But as far as unique, going like, oh, wow. Or like Aretha, where you're like, oh, wow, that voice. Or even like Eddie Vedder, when he came on the scene, you're like, wow, who's that? This guy's got that kind of voice. You listen to it, and it almost sounds like two people are in the band. At times, the way he uses the voice control of the range that he has, you think at one point, you're like, is that another person singing? And then you're like, oh no, he just did it. And when you see it in concert, it makes all the sense in the world. I mean, he's physical when he's singing. He's hitting his wrist like this. He's slapping the floor. He's dancing. He's doing like stripper moves. Like, it's amazing. It's just amazing. So if you want to see a little snippet of what it's like to go there, go to my website, Stories from the 78.com. It's the front page. Well, by the time this airs, it won't be. So just type in Future Islands. You'll see it on the website. It is a fantastic time. I couldn't highly recommend it more. So thank you for watching. I appreciate it as always. If you got a second, subscribe, tell your friends, tell your grandma. I'll take anybody. That's fine. But I appreciate you just hearing about Chicago in a positive light, because there's so much said about our city it's just crap. And, some of it's earned crap. And a lot of it's just people want to pile on for no other reason, just to pile on because it's popular to do so. And I'm here to say, stick it, because Chicago is an awesome place. And a lot of things have happened here. A lot of wonderful things have happened here. A lot of inventions and people, and the way things are and the way in the world that they are is because it started here in Chicago. So, and I like to show that off as much as possible. And people like Mike, who own Heritage Bikes and Coffee, are like a little microcosm of the type of people that live here, that want it to do well and want it to succeed. So on that note, thank you for watching, and I will talk to you guys next week. Take care.